That novel experience, I think, is so key because we can so easily limit them. And if we can trust them to have a new experience, learn something new, and have someone who's still showing up every 2 weeks, encouraging them and having that connection of, I believe you can do this. Let's practice together. And that positive mentorship that I think you've really given so well to them, Chris, that's such gold. And having the counselor and the teacher believe in them enough to say, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, but let's try it out and let them experience something new, like being on a stage and doing these activities is so key.
Welcome to This Helps, where we sit down with the world's leading helpers to find out how they're helping and also what helps them. By the end of this episode, you'll have practical tools to improve your own mental health. I'm Marlon Morgan, founder and CEO of Wellness Together, an organization dedicated to improving the mental health of thousands of people every day. Join me and my insightful Gen Z co-host Hannah Ravitch as we sit down for authentic and vulnerable conversations with people dedicated to helping others. What helps? Let's find out. Welcome to another episode of This Helps. We are so excited to be here. We have some very special guests. Hannah, are you excited?
Super excited.
How, 1 to 10? 10 being you can barely control your excitement.
I have to say a solid 8. 8 out of 10. I can't wait to hear these stories. I've heard some in the past and they always melt my heart. So I'm really excited.
Is there any way that by the end of this, our special guests could get you to a 10 out of 10? Like if we check in back at the end of this, is there a road to perfection?
Most definitely. I think that I'm excited to hear the stories, but once I actually hear them, I think it'll just be like a full experience.
Well, we are so excited to welcome back to the podcast actor, comedian, author, Chris Gethard. Chris, thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to be back. Thanks so much for having me.
And we also have another special guest. You've heard her once before, so we're welcoming her back to the podcast, and that is Britney Stone, former clinical director at Wellness Together, and now is the senior director of outreach and engagement. There is a reason that these two go together, and you will find that out very soon. Who wants to start?
That's all you, Chris.
I can say that the reason we go together is that we work together on a program called Laughing Together, which I think it's fair to say probably the two of us are the primary people responsible for building Laughing Together from the ground up. And it's been really pleasant and great to work together and also eye-opening in so many ways. And I think I sort of had the idea that something like this could work and have been surprised at the actual results now that we've been out in schools doing it. And it's been really eye-opening.
So glad you're both here to tell us about Laughing Together. What is it? Why is it named that? What are you all doing?
The short answer is that Laughing Together basically sends comedians into schools teaching workshops in comedy to teachers and students and whoever wants the workshops. But what the participants don't know is that all the exercises have been selected because they're actually really focused on communication, on human connection. There's a lot of research about how if you don't focus on the comedy side of comedy, a lot of these exercises are really focusing on getting people to get on the same page and connect with each other. So the workshops aim to strengthen all those muscles.
Who are we serving? Is it one type of school? Is there one population that has been more open to this than others?
We found it's really varied. We've gone to schools that face a lot of financial issues, communities that face food insecurity. We've also taught at some very high-end private schools. We've done conferences with educators who are coming together statewide, and people from all different types of districts come up to us afterwards and tell us that they think it could work with their district. So we've seen, I think, as wide a range of people reacting positively to it, as you could imagine.
What are they hoping for? They hear you talk about laughing together, and then they want you to come to their school. You've been in over 7 states and taught thousands of students and adults, educators. What are they have to be like coming to you and saying, like, we want blank?
I think a lot of it is they go, oh, you have games, and kids can feel like they're playing games. But when they play these games, they're increasing their eye contact, they're listening to each other's ideas, they're finding ways to unconditionally support each other. And that's the goal of the games. Sign us up. We get that a lot. And then in a way that I think is very basic, and in some ways actually the consistency with which I hear this is concerning, just the name Laughing Together, we get a lot of interest from people going, we need tension release. We need more laughter. We need the positivity that comes with it. A lot of times when we get booked for professional development with teachers, we hear from the principal or the administrator, the superintendent level people, I have a very stressed out staff. So if you can teach them some stuff that has some of these skills in it, and they get to spend a day bonding and laughing with one another, that's of high value to me right there.
Yeah, healthy teachers, healthy educators are the best thing we can provide for our students, I think. So there's not just one group of people that are really into this, because, I mean, the things you said are so universal. Deeper connections, laugh with each other, understand each other, really see and be seen.
We've seen it all over with, like Chris said, with youth and adults, corporate settings, educational settings, university settings. For faculty, have had a few of those. I think universally everyone needs mental health skills, and usually it's the people who are looking out for their staff or team or kids that are saying we need this in particular. It's different. And because Chris has been doing one school in particular himself, like going and teaching, we have some great stories and like case study from this one school, because that's the one where Chris has been showing up every 2 weeks as one of the teachers. But we have a huge team of professional expert teachers who are going all over and teaching these across the country.
Okay. Thanks for describing that. I think that gives us a good picture of at least kind of the basics of what you're walking into and how we're helping. Chris, I think most people know you as a comedian that sort of broke a barrier and had a first, which was in 2017. You had a special on HBO, now Max, which I don't like calling it Max because that's my son's name. So I'm going to keep calling it Home Box Office. But you had a special, and it was called Career Suicide. You talked a lot about your own mental health, somehow made what I would call a very difficult struggle, challenging topic. You made it funny. Everyone loved it. And since then, you've done a lot of work in the area where mental health and comedy sort of intersect, and Laughing Together seems to be like the next version of that. Yeah,
it's definitely the most like roll up your sleeves and get things done version of it. Since Career Suicide, probably even more than Career Suicide, because it's so active and it's about mobilizing artists. Basically, when I met you, Marlon, and everybody a few years ago at the Wellness Together's conference, you guys had me speak, and that was after Career Suicide came out. And I think back to it, and I do sometimes laugh because I had really slowed down. I started to realize, and I'm not trying to disparage any of our colleagues in this world. There's so many people out there doing great work, so many organizations out there doing great work. I would also just say personal opinion, not representative of Wellness Together as a whole. I am an employee at this point, but I'm not representing the organization when I say I also started to realize that from my vantage point coming off of HBO, I was being asked to go do a lot of speaking at organizations, and you started to realize, oh, this is a fundraising event, and I'm happy to help raise funds. But again, personal opinion, start to realize some of these places are really, really masterful at raising funds and have a lot of trouble answering the direct question of what do you use the funds towards? And I was starting to get very turned off by that. And when I got asked by Wellness Together to come speak, I was honestly in a phase of life where I was like, I kind of don't want to be a part. There's this a little bit of a circuit of like mental health speaking circuit. And I felt like I'd said everything I needed to say as on HBO. And to me, I'm like, if it's not getting work done, if it's not accomplishing anything, I don't want to keep monetizing the fact that I had a very dangerous stretch of my 20s, you know, like it's nothing to make money off of. That would kind of sell out the idea that I was doing this for altruistic purposes in the first place. So when I met Wellness Together and I realized that it's, hey, we get in-person therapists on the ground in front of kids. Hey, there's a lot of methodologies that are specifically designed in our program so that you can't fall into the trap of stigmas, right? Like a lot of the methodologies are, hey, if you have a hesitant whomever, parent, teacher, school board member, who's like, we design our programs to be stigma proof in a lot of ways. I sat there, I heard everything WT was doing. I was like, this is incredible. This is incredible. This is the real deal people. You know, I've met some people who I go, wow, we raised how much tonight? And it seems like most of it's going to go towards paying for the rental in this incredibly fancy place you held the fundraiser in, you know, like, yeah, I think really clicked. And
well, you had told me, and this was like, I mean, pretty quickly, I don't know if you felt this way too, but like we started talking, we immediately started talking about deep stuff, which I think we're both pretty intense, and like found a person that would want to do that right away. No small talk. And you just kind of started talking about how you had at shows become the person who afterwards, so many people would come up to you and say, you sharing that, you being vulnerable and honest in that room is inspirational to me, and it has helped them do the same thing. And you said that, you know, I just pictured this line afterwards of people coming to get like 5 minutes of therapy from Chris Gethard.
Oh, 5 minutes would have been quick.
Well, you're so nice. I feel like, yeah. What was that like?
I've actually become much more private. I tour a lot less, and I've stopped selling merchandise after shows, and some of it is because I would, no joke, sometimes be on stage for 90 minutes, and then the merchandise line would take over 2 hours. It would be like doing an entire another show. Sometimes people a friend, my good friend, Carmen Christopher, who's out there crushing it right now. He just dropped a great special. He was on the road with me in 2018. And the very first time we did a show together, the first night, a woman came up to the merchandising table and started speaking and then burst out crying and then turned around and ran out the venue, left at the front door. And he was like, what was that? And I was like, it happens sometimes. Like, you got to get used to it. But there were times where he was like, you know, I was married already. He was single at the time. He's like, I want to go out. Like, we're in some city that I've heard is cool. And like, we're here. We're still at this venue 2.5 hours after the show ended. Like, the bars are closing soon. I want to go see what this city has to offer. So he wasn't being a jerk about it. He was actually very concerned for me.
Yeah. That's a weighty situation to be in.
And I had no training and no authority to speak. And there were so many conversations where people were pouring their hearts out to me, and it was deeply meaningful, but I would just find myself saying, like, thank you for telling me. I'm glad that my special helped you get there. I see that it means a lot for you to tell me, but if you can tell me, you can also now tell a shrink. Like, you've said it out loud. Like, if you're telling me you've never told anyone this, well, now you have. But guess what? Like, I'm doing another show in St. Louis tomorrow, and like, I'm gone. So you gotta go tell somebody who could actually help you. And it was really, the burnout was real. It was creating a lot of fear, some sort of paranoia about even meeting people. So point being, though, when I met WT, it's not like I'm not motivated to still help. I was just motivated to maybe close off the access to my personal bandwidth so much. And we got to talking about how comedy improv in particular actually started as social work. It didn't start with the intent of getting people on Saturday Night Live. It was the 1930s.
You blew my mind. This all happened literally backstage in a completely dark area off to the side, and you started giving me this incredible history lesson about, was it Viola Spolin or is it Viola Spolin?
Yeah, I've heard it pronounced both ways. I think it's Viola.
Okay.
I've pronounced it both ways myself, but yeah, she worked at a community center basically in Chicago during the Depression, and they had all these kids there who didn't speak the same native language. It was the inner city, immigrant city. So how do you get kids who don't know how to speak to each other to communicate? You have to do it through play. So she worked under a social worker, Neva Boyd, I believe was her name, and had a lot of theories on kids connecting through play. And
so all these kids were from different neighborhoods, had a lot of them spoke different languages. They weren't connected. There was hardly any way for them to be connected.
Yeah, and a lot of it was overcoming the language barrier of, hey, it's inner city Chicago in the 30s. This means there's kids speaking German, Polish, Greek, English, Spanish, Italian, all the different immigrant pockets at the time. And to some limited degree, figuring out how to speak through language, but the ability to get them to communicate through play created these shows. And you can actually go read reviews of some of the original these shows. Apparently there were dozens and dozens of kids in the cast. They were all little kids doing the first, what we would call improv shows, playing these theater games. And you can read these reviews from newspapers in Chicago at the time. And a lot of them are like, hey, we're not saying that this is like Shakespeare reborn. We're not saying that, nobody's saying this is like we just saw Death of a Salesman hatched fully formed, but something really unique and special is happening with this. Like something very, very interesting is going on. And you can argue that improv goes back to like commedia dell'arte, which is an Italian Renaissance era style of acting, but in reality, everyone who's been a part of this tradition that I've been a part of for 25 years knows it really was hatched from the minds of some social workers less than 100 years ago in Chicago, all for the purpose of play. So we basically said, okay, I know all the best improv teachers in the country, or a lot of them personally. I've known them for years. And they're all people who are down to help. And Britney's been really incredible about going, okay, like if we strip away the need to put on a good show or to be hilarious, what are the exercises you guys all know that bring it back to those roots from 100 years ago of kids connecting through play, kids communicating on this sort of less verbal, more visceral level, this unregulated level, this level that's open-ended and determined by the participants as they're in the moment. They get to decide what it is along the way. And then to read the research of what people are looking for in schools right now, you sit there and you go, oh, my improv friends who are teaching improv classes, and we all feel kind of dopey. Like, hey, we're teaching people how to pretend to be bank robbers and cowboys and characters and all this stuff. Like, oh no, you're actually working muscles that if you apply them in a school setting, people are very, very desperate to get kids working those exact muscles.
Brittany, when you first heard Chris talk about this and he started to talk about how like the origin of improv and what it did for the people who were involved, what were your sort of first thoughts?
Well, I didn't know anything about improv.
Tell us about your background a little bit.
I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been licensed for 15 years and have been working in the field for 5 to 6 years before that. So I've worked in a lot of different places in mental health, including inpatient hospitalization facilities and outpatient work. Specializing with children was really where I spent most of my time, and then spent a good handful of years in private practice working with families and adults. But the kids in the work that we do at Wellness Together, supporting kids on school sites, is really where my heart is and where I've spent a lot of my time in my work here with Wellness Together. But when Chris came on board, you two, I think, had already had the vision for what that could be. And I kind of joined late. So when I was catching up, like, okay, what's the plan? Chris started talking about Spolin, and I started thinking like, okay, how, like, I need to wrap my head around this and do some research on how this relates to what we do and how to really get up to speed. And the more I talked to Chris and understood what improv was, then I was like, oh my gosh, this is like fast tracking play therapy and specialized techniques that I use with clients and that we teach our staff to use with students, like fast tracking it full speed by practicing some of these improv exercises that I didn't know existed.
How does it speed it up? Like, what are the techniques that that you started thinking like, oh, this is like that, or this is going to help us do this?
Yeah. Well, it reminds me, like, early on, Marlon, you had said something like, oh, we don't need to explain to them what the skills are. They just need to do the skills. And I thought, okay, let me wrap my head around that, because the improv stuff was so new to me. But once I started seeing how Chris would operationalize play in a way that I could take research and my experience working with kids and say like, oh, they're practicing this skill without explaining, hey, we're going to learn a skill that's going to teach you how to have better frustration tolerance because you're going to be annoyed and you're not going to want to do this, but you're going to do it anyway.
What you just said makes me frustrated.
Right. It's annoying. And like, as a play therapist and working with kids, you have to, that's where your goal is, but there's different ways that an effective therapist, works with kids to get them there. But the use of improv to just have them practice it in play was huge. And Nidra Boyd and Viola Spolin's work on that. And then hearing from Chris about improv, like there's these different types of games within the game. And I started reading all about that. And it just got me excited, especially with some of the research that we've been doing before that around how to help our kids in school-based therapy manage screens and less independent play at home and all these different things. Chris and I really nerded out about that when we first set out to build the program.
To hear about how it's all been happening, and I sort of know how successful it's been, and we're going to get to some of those stories. But when Chris and I first met and we had that original conversation, Chris had mentioned, hey, I love comedy. I'm sort of he was still very involved in, I would say, touring more and auditioning on a lot of TV shows that he would pop up all the time. And he said, I'm thinking about going back to school and becoming a social worker. And having just kind of from the outside looking in and already being a huge fan, and knowing that he had done such an incredible job at the conference and connecting with the educators that we wanted to inspire to help their kids, like it just freaked me out to think about Chris having like 4 clients a day, 5 days a week. And
you were like, I don't want to blow up your spot too much. You were like, you don't want to be a social, like, I promise you, like, yeah. you're going to spend years in grad school. You're going to be a social worker for a few years, and then you're going to take it and move on to something else. And I think you could just get to that thing. Like, I think you're there.
Yeah. Like being I am a therapist. I did all that and I loved it, and I would still do it if I wasn't doing this. I think it's honorable and probably one of my favorite things that I think someone can do with their life to actually help other people. However, Chris, you had already built like sort of this empire and this awareness around mental health. And I thought like, wait a minute, we want to like build from this foundation, and you could do exactly what you want to do, but help lots and lots of people do it on a huge scale. And I think that's what has been happening over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, we wound up kind of just having a bunch of sessions about, a lot of me going, here's a bunch of improv exercises that I think might work, and sort of turning that, and Britney going through and going like, this one I'm not certain about, this. Oh, but this one oh, this actually ties into this, this, and this. And then Britney and the clinical team coming back and going, oh, there's all sorts of research about this. And this game pushes the exact button that this research is speaking to. And then it was really eye-opening to realize there's actual research about the efficacy of improv, specifically in relation to childhood anxiety. There's a fairly decent amount that's out there. And then I'm seeing it and I'm going, whoa, I've been, for many, many years, I was one of the people in the world of improv that was leading the charge on how it was taught. Certainly out of the UCB Theater in New York, which was a very influential place at the time. And I think that probably meant I had some national impact on the teaching of improv in my heyday. And I'm going, I've never heard of this research. And this came out when I was the most in the thick of it. And then I'm calling up my friend Will Hines, who is like not just a brilliant teacher, but very much passionate about teaching and very knowledgeable about the history. I'm like, Will, did you know there was this university did a study on the effects of improv spread out over, X amount of years? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I just realized that's a massive missed opportunity to have the people who are best at teaching this have no knowledge about the actual research about how to apply it most effectively in a different way is just sort of like saying, it almost felt to me like before we actually went and taught our first workshops that there was a lot of research that was like, hey, that's what a ball looks like. And that's what a bat looks like. And here's what a bat can do to a ball. And no one had ever really thought to say, like, someone should pick up that bat and hit that ball with it. We actually realized along the way, there is one group, I want to give credit to the Detroit Creativity Project, because we realized there's one group that in the public schools in Detroit, Michigan, does do it, and I think really does it the right way. It was like, whoa, and I realized through the fact that the world of comedy is small, I'm only a couple steps away from the founders, and I got on the phone with them, and I was like, I want you to know I've been working on this thing for months, and came across what you guys are doing, and it's similar. And they were like, that's awesome. Here's all our advice. We have no desire to do this outside of Detroit. People ask us to, but we just want to nail it in our hometown. We love Detroit. We want to do right by Detroit. So glad someone else is realizing the power of this stuff. And they actually gave me some really brilliant advice that proved quite true.
Yeah, they were sort of up on the research. I think they were some of the only folks that had been aware of how improv can actually improve mental health or connect people on a deeper level. And they were so collaborative, like you said, when you called. That was cool.
So kind. And we launched after a bunch of those conversations about the research and is anybody out here doing it, and just realizing we've got all the research. We've got really brilliant teachers at this. And for some reason, no one has put it together. And we taught our first workshop November of 2023. And we're recording this in February of 2025, and it's well above 5,000 people that we've taught at this point. I think it's probably, we haven't added it up in a while, but my guess it's probably about 7,000 people.
I was going to say 7 too, Chris. Yeah. I think that experience that you had of, wow, I didn't know that, was kind of how I felt from the mental health point of like, what, these games are perfect for hitting some of the pieces that kids really need practice with, especially nowadays, when there's less social interaction. There's like a real, like, you can avoid pretty much anything you don't want to do nowadays, especially if it involves someone else. And just all these different pieces that came out. And I remember stumbling on one Saturday morning, I remember I was reading Will Hines' Substack. I couldn't get over it because he broke down some of the games in the different exercises that he teaches, and the way that he described them, I couldn't think of them as anything other than mental health skills. I couldn't believe it. I remember sending Chris like a 5-page email that Saturday while I was drinking coffee and reading this Substack. Like, what? I had no idea when people said improv that there was all this strategy behind it in different ways. I mean, I just had never seen it before. But I think I felt the same, like, wow, I didn't know this existed, and this is fast tracking mental health skill building for kids. And then once we started the program, I don't think we knew exactly what it would turn out to be, but we both wanted it to be bigger than a workshop here, a workshop there. And Wellness Together is all about bigger impact and scaling for more access for kids and people to have mental health skills. And so as we started doing that and developing these returning relationships with schools, especially the one that Chris has been in, it was like week after or month after month, session after session, that you're seeing kids change in these skills, like sticking and coming out and improving how they're showing up to the next workshop. It's been amazing.
Are there stories?
Oh,
Chris?
Are there stories, Marlon? There are stories. Yeah, we signed a contract with a public high school in New York City. I won't be too specific.
That's good. And I just want to make the point that the 7,000 people that you all have served over the last few years, it's like 7 different states, right? Or 8?
It's been, all over the country at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Washington State, Texas, California.
Just to anonymize it more before you tell any stories.
All over the place. But and we've had inquiries from all over the country to the point where we've started to realize there are regional hubs of improv where we should have teachers, so that just to make it more accessible. There are teachers close to all of the areas, and to train them in our specific style and give them a crash course in the goals of it. It's been beautiful, and to see the artists want to step up. But yeah, we got hired for a 10 workshop contract at a school in New York City. I feel like that's vague enough. We taught 2 workshops there last year and the 10 this year. The 2 last year went really well. One of the teachers at the first one stepped out of the room because she started crying because she saw all these kids letting their guard down right away, which was very meaningful to me. But also, I definitely raised an eyebrow a bit of like, whoa, to have a teacher crying day one, seeing kids letting their guard down. I'm going, these are kids who, that tells me, don't let their guard down very often at a tough inner city high school,
These aren't really teachers that let their guard down very often either. So the idea that that teacher was so moved.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening. Now we came back this year after those 2 workshops last year. I won't lie, I was feeling a little cocky because I was like, this is great. We know this school and how this works. But day one, I realized, man, this is an uphill climb. I was there by myself. Generally, there's 2 teachers assigned to this contract on each workshop, but my friend, great improviser named Jamie Rivera, who I actually started with in college, who he teaches at the Magnet Theater, Second City. He couldn't make the very first one. And I remember calling him and saying, like, dude, we gotta go in there almost with a fighter's mentality. And he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, when I tell you, what basically was explained to me was that the seniors last year were old enough that COVID, they were old enough to sort of see it for what it was, and they buckled down and put in the work. They were close to college. They're already applying, writing their essays if they're going, looking for jobs if they're not. So they were like, this COVID stuff's bad. Buckle up, get the work done, everybody, because this is bad. I was told that if they can get more freshmen to join the club, the freshmen were young enough that their parents were still on top of it, of like, okay, this is really bad, and we got to helicopter over our kids and help them through this a little bit. Most of the people showing up were sophomores and juniors, and the teachers told us they have not bounced back from COVID. It's also a school where, to be clear, close to 80% of the school faces food insecurity. It's eye-opening, and we're in New York City, where I know psychologically as a teacher, I also have had to talk with Britney a lot, and one of the things we've had to think about for I'm the guinea pig for every Laughing Together teacher, because I'm like, I got to go in and do it and see what works and doesn't before I send other people in.
People should really know, Chris, that you are the one who shows up. Like, I think a lot of times, people in entertainment or, that have had some success will do something like this, and they'll maybe help fund something like this or get donations.
No.
But you're not only doing all of that. You show up like, hey, I'm Chris Gethard. I'm here to be your arts program.
Brittany's actually had to tell me, hey, at some point you can't be
Stop.
the guy trying to teach every single workshop. And I'm like, but that's where the victory is, like that's where the real work is.
Well,
But that's what was so amazing about this, because we got to really, especially with this particular school, because Chris, you were the one there, and this was one of our pilot schools. We got lucky. And so Chris was there every time, and we used every time that you would come back and drive home from the location, call me, and we'd be like, wow.
I'd often be sitting in traffic going, like, Brittany, I need to. It was so hard. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back too hard. You can ask certain people who will tell you, and I don't necessarily agree with this. There are people who will say, I'm the best teacher of improv they've ever encountered. There are people who make that claim. I don't think that's true, but that's been said about me.
A lot of people are saying it's true.
I've never had a harder gig than this high school in New York. I would sit in this traffic trying to get home and call Britney and be like, I need to just tell somebody this or else my head is going to fall off my shoulders. The original intent was that I would teach the first 3 or 4 with Jamie, who I mentioned, and then he'd take over and finish out the contract because it was his first Laughing Together contract. So I'll show him how it works for the first 3 or 4. Day 1, I had to call Britney and say, there is a 0% chance that we can ask anyone else to go do this alone. I have to be there every time. Marlon, when I tell you that every single kid sat in silence before the workshop started with their phone 4 to 6 inches from their face, that is not an exaggeration. Every single kid. None of them interacting with each other. All of them staring at their phones.
Well, something like improv is exactly what they would be successfully avoiding by doing that.
Wait till you hear how it goes. I mean, when I tell you that we had a kid who, I wish I could tell you his name because his name is so endearing, but I'll leave names out of it. Who this kid, he is an intimidating kid. He's a big, broad-shouldered teenager, and he looks mad. Will not put down his phone. I got them on stage and had them doing a very basic exercise. There's a lot of basic exercise in improv where we're going to stand in a circle, we're going to pass focus around. Sometimes that's I'll clap at the same time as my neighbor, and then you clap at the same time as your neighbor, and we pass the clap around the circle. We were doing that. It's a very, very basic exercise.
Was he into it?
It would get to this kid the first time, and then the clap would go around the circle of maybe 20 kids. By the time it got back to him, he would have his phone out in front of his face on stage in an exercise. And I could sense, like, I have had situations as a teacher where I'm teaching adults where if they want to act like clowns, I can call them out. But those are people who paid money for an improv class who are disrupting the experience for other people who paid for an improv class. These are kids who were asked to do this by a teacher who said this is going to be a good experience. So I know I can't yell at this kid, but I'm sitting here and I'm going, what is this? And I remember saying to him, like, hey, man, I really need you to put your phone away. You're on stage. You're in an exercise. And he looked up at me with this genuine remorse and went, oh, my God, I'm so sorry. I forgot we were doing this. And I realized he's not lying. His attention span is such that he legitimately forgot that he was standing on a stage in front of 20 of his peers. He forgot. He might as well be sitting in a chair. He might as well be sitting in a chair in the corner of the room by himself. He forgot he was on a stage standing in a circle with his peers.
He left the moment completely.
100% was in his own world. And then when I called him out and was just like, you got to put your phone away. He got so overwhelmed that he went and stood with his face touching the wall and didn't participate. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, I am not in the business of diagnosing. There's no world in which we ask our comedians to be mental health professionals. They're working with the guidance and oversight of mental health professionals. But I'm sitting here and I'm going, this kid felt like everyone was looking at him for a 15-second conversation. And I was very gentle. And he couldn't handle his peers looking at him to the point where he is now very visibly short-circuiting and placing his face against a wall.
Is there a better or more sad analogy for how we are using our phones than if we can't have it, we'll use an actual wall? Like put an actual wall in front of our face instead?
Good point, right?
Remarkable. And I'll tell you, Marlon, just to kind of follow this kid's story, a lot of people's instincts would be, he can't do this. We can't have him in here. It's making it worse for everyone else.
That was what I was thinking right now.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, at the end of day one, I managed to coax him back into participating in something, and he said something where everyone else was very surprised, and they laughed. And I saw him I saw it sort of jolt him into this brief moment of looking around and realizing everyone's laughing because of what I said. And laughing together. Exactly. You know, communication is at the core of comedy, is one of the things we always say. It's when you remove the goal of laughter from comedy exercises, they're actually really, really incredible communication exercises. And he had that moment of, I said a thing, everyone else laughed. It connected him to the group for this moment. And the teacher came up to me, and I brought up that kid right away. I said, I have not dealt with that. I have to think about how we're going to handle that. And he said, just so you know, he came up to me on the way out and said, how come this is only every 2 weeks? It should be every week. I loved that.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh man, this kid has real troubles. But that one moment of connection got him hooked.
You created a safe environment to bring him back into reality for the first time in who knows how long.
It was visible. And then, you know, the teacher in charge and he and I were joking because I said that was really hard. And I feel like I dropped the ball. He said, no, you see what we're dealing with now. He goes, that's every classroom in this school right now. We all call it iPad brain. We call it COVID brain. When Jamie and I left the first week he was there, the security guard stopped us and said, I heard you're doing acting workshops with the kids. How's it going? And we were like, you know, it's tough. It's hard to get them to engage with us and with each other. And she said, when the kids enter, she's out front as a security guard and says hello to all of them. Mm-hmm. And she says they just stare at the floor and keep walking. And she's had to stop individual kids and say, I need you to understand that when I grew up, if someone looked at you and said hello and you just kept walking, you were trying to start a fight. That's what that used to mean in a neighborhood like this in the city. You're being disrespectful and you want to fight. And these kids would go, oh, and you have to, she was like, I, as a security guard, one of my job duties this year is to remind them to look up and make eye contact with each other. Like she's like, that's where we're at. And she was saying it in terms of like, good luck with your acting exercises. Like she had no hope in it. But when I tell you that the next week, one of the next workshop, 2 weeks later, the teacher and I emailed a bunch of thoughts and ideas. He said, one thing I'm going to do is set up a table in the back and tell everybody you have to put your phone on the table in the back. And that kid who, out of all these phone addicted kids, was the most phone addicted, taking it out on stage. He said, I can't. He almost had a panic attack. I can't do it. And he had a number of reasons why. But he said, how about I just leave my phone in my pocket? And we said, okay. And he went through almost the entire workshop. And towards the end, he just got off stage and took out his phone. And I said, there's the addiction. But it was about 45 minutes he went without looking at his phone. And then the next week, he showed up. And again, we wound up, it was very, very remarkable. We wound up doing an exercise, I believe week 2, that allows the kids to give, it's a very simple exercise. Anyone who's ever taken an improv class has done it in level 1 class. It's called pet peeve rant. Pick something that's an actual pet peeve of yours, and if the teacher points at you, you start talking, and he's going to randomly point at different people. You don't know when it's coming to you. If he points to 2 people at once, you both talk. If he starts spreading his arms wide, everybody talk. If he does an up motion, get louder. A down motion, get quieter. But it's a lot of, you have to take a chance and express something real. You also have to pay attention to the teacher and sort of build off of the signals they're sending, pick up on the nonverbal cues that they're using that affect how you're delivering your verbiage. This kid started going off about how the game is rigged with capitalism and why are we not paying more attention to climate change, and his parents' generation are punting the ball and kids his age have no, and every single person in the room turned around and went, this is the kid who puts his face against the wall when he's uncomfortable. And it was me, it was the teacher, it was the other kids all turned around, and you could see them all go, what is going on? And we just gave this kid a chance. What is something that bothers you? Shout to the hills about it. Turns out he's got a lot to say.
Yeah.
And
his pet peeve was like existential.
Yeah. Existential and philosophical and legitimately beautiful. And the rest of the class started not just laughing, but clapping. And when he came back for week 3, without needing to be asked, he took his phone out and threw it on the table with all the other kids' phones. And you sit there, and it's the type of conversation Brittany and I have where I go, my standards as a teacher of improv are to make people funnier. But in a school setting, whether that kid gets funnier or not, and he has gotten funnier because he's taking more chances, but that's that's separate from what we've accomplished. We've taken a kid who went from forgot he was standing on a stage because he's so addicted to his phone that he's staring into it in front of 25 confused people going, what's he doing? And when I go, hey man, you can't have your phone out right now. He goes, oh my God, I forgot. Within 3 weeks, you had a kid who went from that addicted to his phone to voluntarily putting it on airplane mode and putting it with the rest of them and walking to the other side of the room. And you sit there and you go, some of these kids will really have communication muscles strengthened. I'll be fully honest. I've been in some schools that don't face 75 to 80% food insecurity, where they're probably getting a lot more out of the intent of the exercise. But for kids in that environment to realize we used these games and the games felt fun, and it turns out what we've got is a really anxiety-riddled kid who's worried about the world in a big picture way that's crushing him. And he needs to work that out, and I hope there are people that's beyond the laughing together pay grade, I would think, but giving him a platform to express it does help. And the acceptance of his peers via the clapping and the laughter and the surprise that he has so much to say made him willfully want to get off his phone and be a part of a group that he had felt very, very separate from and clearly very rejected from the social experience before that. I'm super proud of that.
You should be so proud of it, Chris. I think I want to stop you and go back to a few different things because, as per usual, while you're telling a story, I have 10 things I want to respond to that are so cool within that. But the beginning, you mentioned, I mean, Chris set the stage for this school and sort of the opportunities that aren't there and the limited kind of scope of their classes or experiences that are in front of them to choose from. And this opportunity with such a novel experience is something that I think, as when Chris would tell me about it on his ride home, I would think as a therapist, we're not often, and I know educators the same, bringing kids that have various challenges into a novel situation that you can't control, that they don't know how to behave in or interact with. You're just dropping them in this new experience. It doesn't happen very often. And Chris was able to handle it, of course, but I mean, it was difficult in the beginning. But that novel experience, I think, is so key because we can so easily limit them. And if we can trust them to have a new experience, learn something new, and have someone who's still showing up every 2 weeks, encouraging them and having that connection of, I believe you can do this. Let's practice together. And that just positive mentorship that I think you've really given so well to them, Chris, that's such gold. And having the counselor and the teacher believe in them enough to say, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, but let's try it out and let them experience something new, like being on a stage and doing these activities is so key. But Marlon, I was going to tell you too, something that you would appreciate. When Chris would call me and we'd be talking about the situation, I started like teaching him parent-child interaction therapy skills that I learned of like, okay,
Great.
some basics, like behavior management, like here's what, don't say, no, don't stop, quit or not. Do redirects. Let's do some behavioral descriptions, labeled phrases, because it was pretty intense. But over time, I think it really showed if you can persist through that, so can the kids. And they can make that change. They can make that progress. And it's changing them. They just need the opportunity to. But the phone addiction too, Chris, I wanted to mention that because that was something like we read the studies and we've been hearing, I'm always passing them around the office, and we share them a lot around what mental health issues are facing kids and what they're struggling with and how that's impacting their social skills and their ability to show up. But the stories that came out of your experience, Chris, was like all of like the worst one in all those articles amplified across an entire group of students. It was wild. Like, I don't think people realize what it's actually looking like with a group of students, that's facing these challenges and might not have the intervention or opportunities that other students do to have an adult intervene or anything other than the phone to deal with.
I remember very distinctly saying, I think to you, Britt, I'm not saying I changed this, but I'm saying I don't feel this way anymore. But in the early workshops we did, when I saw the level of isolation these kids craved, wanting to not look at each other, wanting to not participate in exercises. And I'm bringing up that kid because he was an extreme example. Other kids who were just talking full volume as other kids are trying to do the exercise when they're on stage with them. They're not even in the back of the room. And you realize some of this is just the self-sabotage of, we don't want to link up as a group, dude. Why are you making us do this? And I remember saying, these kids are 15, 16 years old. When I was 16 years old, there was one summer where there was a summer camp for younger kids in my town, and I went and I was a counselor. Friends of mine when I was 16 were hosts at the Applebee's at the mall in the next town over.
Yeah.
And I remembered having this realization of, these kids I'm working with, they couldn't do that. They couldn't work the types of jobs. Like, if these kids had to walk out of here right now and participate in society, they couldn't do it in the same way I was doing. Now, I'm sure there's other things they do better.
They can get there. Like, and I think that's what we learn, right? Like, they need to learn those skills. Those skills aren't coming on default setting anymore.
But to echo what you were saying of like, oh, it's one thing to read about it. And it's another thing to walk into an environment where you go, oh, this is the type of place that they're writing the article about. And I'm seeing that these kids are being, due to whatever societal factors of some combination of technology, of, we're in an area where I'm sure their parents are working. I have come to learn there's a lot of single parent households here. There's food insecurity. There's all sorts of systemic things happening. But these kids are carrying the bag for it. And you go, I've read articles about places like this, and now I'm in it. And you go, oh, they're hanging on by a thread. And it's hard. There's a handful of times where Britney has taught me some crash course skills, and sometimes where I realize, Britney just had to accidentally have a mini therapy session with me, because sometimes you walk out of an environment like this and go, the game is rigged. The game is rigged, and these kids are the ones carrying the bag, and Britney has to remind me, the game's not, I don't know if the game, maybe the game's not totally rigged, but we got to get to work. We got to help. And there's a lot of people trying, and you're one of them. And these teachers are there, and these counselors stopping by are there. And it's hard not to feel that despair, that burnout,
Yeah.
But I can tell you more positive stories too.
Hannah, what are you thinking?
So many thoughts. I mean, I love that story, and I feel like so much of that just came up in our last podcast episode, actually, where we were talking about generations and how they all have navigated the world of technology and social media. And that feeling, you're talking about that student saying physically could not separate from their phone.
Mm-hmm.
That's a feeling that I've felt. And so, yeah, hearing that is so powerful. But then also just hearing the growth in a few weeks, it made me emotional. I'm like, I love hearing that. And I think it's really cool. And I think about it in high school. Like, I would have been terrified of an improv class, absolutely terrified. But I would have done it, and I'm sure that I would have learned so much from it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Hannah, I told Chris that one of the first times we started working on this, like being in this would have been my worst nightmare as a teenager. I was very shy,
Yeah.
but I probably would have been really good for me. That's why I think the program is so important, because the kids they just need the skills and somebody to believe in them and an opportunity to practice in something new. And it's not easy for adults. Like it would have been way easier for Chris to stop going, and way easier for his teachers not to push for the program and to not facilitate this. And Chris has gone above and beyond. Like, Marlon, you'll be happy to know that we bring pizza now.
Oh, good. Good.
Well,
You got to have some food.
There were a bunch of kids showing up consistently halfway through.
If you go anywhere with 80% food insecurity, that's the number one
bring pizza
thing to do.
Yep.
Well, we started to realize all these kids were showing up late. And when I asked why, I was quietly told, well, there's another club that meets on the same day and they have food.
Oh,
and
wow.
the kids all like this better. But like,
so they'd go get the food and then
they
come
go
over
get the
to
food
Chris's
from the
workshop.
other club, and then they come over to ours after. There's also a snack cart. The school sends around a snack cart, and I realized it was actually a very sad moment for me, because I realized those first 3-4 weeks, just getting them to look at each other and stop chattering through exercises and stop sabotaging stuff through just lack of focus and talking through it. Sometimes it would take 7, 8, 9 minutes to get them focused. Sometimes it would take them 20 minutes to get focused. And that's like as the teacher, it's me and another teacher of 20 years.
Yeah.
Going, man, I don't know how to explain it except to say, like, it's the closest I have felt. It's like the improv version of being on a bucking bronco in a rodeo, of like, I gotta just hang on until everything calms down. And when I tell you that the snack cart never came at a set time, but always came 90 seconds after we actually got them to focus, it was like clockwork. If it took 5 minutes and we were like, cool, we got them, here's the snack cart, everybody's out the door. If it took 20 minutes, doesn't, like, why couldn't you have come 5 minutes in this? It was chaos. If you came 5 minutes in that week, it would have been great. But then you got to take a deep breath and realize, I can't resent a snack cart. For some of you could tell. All the kids would turn and walk off the stage, and you'd see, for some of them, they go, cool, the snack cart's here. And for some of them, you realize nothing else matters right now. Those are calories.
These are basic needs that need to be met before they can do anything. It's why I started the company 10 years ago, is because people were coming to school and their mental health needs were being ignored as if they were students but not people. And we needed to put in place and on campus and accessible, safe, knowledgeable, caring adults that had the time to spend with them to walk through some of the toughest parts of any of our lives. And that's true for adolescents as an experience as a human. So the idea that the kids in this school are coming without even the needs even below that need for connection and belonging and relationship, is just the food. The idea that they're getting those needs met, that we can do that, and then we can build on that on a foundation and allow them to kind of come into a safe environment where they've just eaten and can connect with each other. It's beautiful. And I want to take a second to sort of describe for both of you why I think this is the most important, but also get your feedback to see how far off I might be with this. When I think about what we need most as humans, or I think about what research shows, for example, the longest running study of adult development, the Harvard study of adult development, it's almost 90 years now that they've been conducting that study, 5 generations. And the book that came out last year, I think it's called The Good Life, it really essentially found that there's one factor for us as human beings that contributes most to our healthy and happy lives, our mental health in general. The one factor that they could find that was most correlated with our mental health and our well-being was the depth and the breadth of our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at what's happened in society and how, and this is not, I'm not looking for someone to blame or trying to find a villain, but when you're trying to make money and you find a way all of a sudden to dominate someone's attention to make money, you essentially take away the connections and the strength of the connections that we had as a society before that, because now you think you're getting your need for connection met when you're not. But then you say, well, actually, I'll give you social media. So if you're lonely, I'll sell it back to you. You can have the connection you need, but I'm going to advertise to you the whole time. So I'm going to take it away, and then I'm going to sell it back to you. And that's, for a lot of our students, the isolation, the anxiety, the depression that they're feeling is creating this environment where something that was already hard, going on a stage in front of your peers in adolescence when there's nothing more important to you than what your peers think, was already hard. But what Chris is able to do as a seasoned comedian, someone who has been in dark rooms all over the country, up on a stage by himself, to say that this is hard is blowing my mind. Yes. Because I can't think of anything harder than that. And to continue on my pet peeve rant, I'm about halfway through. If we do it, what I see us doing with this program, with going into these schools, and what I see Chris creating is the environment that actually strengthens relationships faster and more effectively than anything else. And that is creating a safe environment where we understand and know the rules, where you can take risks, but you are doing something very difficult with other people in the same room. It forces you to pay attention, and then it gives you a shared experience to become closer together and to have those strong relationships, to have them recreated. We're not advertising to them. We are giving them exactly what they need. In fact, we're giving them the space to give each other exactly what they need. And if you think about what therapy is to begin with, I would say as a therapist, the three most important things you do, especially when you start out, is you normalize someone's experience, make sure they know they're not alone in it. You say, this is normal. Everybody feels like this sometimes. You validate it. Who wouldn't feel this way? This is hard. This is a challenge. This is risky. And then you create a safe environment, a consistent environment. That's why when Chris says he showed back up again several weeks in a row, that is what's changing it, because you're telling those kids, not only are you valuable, but I am dependable.
Yeah.
And if you do that lots and lots of times over in a row, you have created a situation, you have created an environment that is sort of the opposite of what we're creating for our kids in general, to thrive, to have close relationships, and to see and feel what it's like when someone values you and gives you what you need.
100%, Marlon. So with you on that, especially the piece around them building those relationships with others. That's something that you can't do as easily one-on-one in a therapy room. You can build that relationship with them, but to build it with a peer that they're going to see all day, every single day, is gold.
If you say what you just did is going to increase your connection to others and essentially give you a better life, that is a lesson that you can't. It's really hard because SEL is important. You need to know it exists. You need to have some vocabulary for identifying emotions and describing them and having insights, but actually doing it, actually creating the environment that is safe, having them create the environment that is safe. It's the difference between going away to nature camp or just, having a science class. Like, you are there, you're in the moment, you are learning from each other. All these nonverbal cues that you don't see over the phone, that you can't see through a text. This is life-changing stuff from a mental health standpoint, and it just so happens to be hilarious and fun. So I love what you both have done in creating this program and continue to do with all of the other teachers when it comes to this. And to be able to use those skills, and believe whatever and however they want. We don't want to have anything to do with that. We want them to grow as people and grow in their connection with each other, period.
100%, Marlon. I think that's why I was going to say, just when you did, it's uninformed sometimes that we're saying SEL or mental health skills. These are fundamental life skills that connect people to each other and give them opportunities to have a successful life. And it's amazing. I know we had that talk early on, and I think I pushed a couple of buttons on the team when I was like, oh, having fun is like a byproduct. I don't actually care about that if the kids have fun. Like, I really just want them to, like, that's a fun bonus. But these are life-saving skills. I want them to learn how to do difficult things and to have some hope that they could be good at something that they never considered, to learn their identity and do that in a way that they don't even have to be told any of those words, and they're still holding on to it to make them less likely to struggle with hopelessness or helplessness down the road. Like, fun is just this, I don't know, little dust we put around it, but underneath that is just life-changing skills. It's so cool.
To be especially upsetting, Brittany, and to reframe even what you just said, I'm so glad you said it, because hopelessness and helplessness are the two things we look for as therapists to assess whether or not someone is planning to or wants to die by suicide.
Right.
So the things that are this sort of antidote, they're not a cure, but the antidote to hopelessness and helplessness can only be reached through connection.
Yeah.
Connection to others. We don't ever feel any more hopeless or helpless than when we're by ourselves and totally disconnected. And what adds to that often with kids who are really struggling is they get a bunch of information through one-way channels to them that makes them angry, and then they don't have anyone to connect with and share with. So then they feel very hopeless and very helpless, and that happens in nearly all cases when someone dies by suicide. So the fact that these kids are getting skills and gaining connections and essentially lifelines for when things aren't going well, they're learning how to, under stress, communicate with each other. This is life-saving work.
Thanks, Marlon. I know we feel like it is. And it's not just for kids that are in a challenged school like the one Chris has been talking about. We've been doing it with lacrosse teams and groups of leaders and groups of educators and adults, kids of all kinds. It's we all can use some bolstering of our mental health skills from time to time.
There's two things I want to say about that, which is, one, we really stress to our teachers, and one thing I've learned is, like, we don't need them to be good at improv. We just need them to try, give it a good faith effort, and get something out of it. Getting good at this is not the goal. But I also have witnessed, and this ties into the story that I told you this week, Brittany, of there are some kids who are going to be good at it in a way that's surprising. And to have that happen in front of all their peers watching, like everyone entering this experiment of, like, what is this improv thing?
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot. And most people are going to go, it's fun, but I don't know. Like, I'm not great at it. And then you turn around and go, but that person is. And I never saw that coming from them 1,000 miles away. I never would have predicted that that kid is the one who's excelling. That is brilliant for that kid who is excelling. And for everyone else to see that, I think does unlock a certain type of, I'm not smart enough to know if that's adrenaline or dopamine or oxytocin or whatever it is, but the shared experience of seeing one of your peers level up in front of you is a community building moment. Yeah. And that's what's happening with the kid who I called you about this week, Britt, because that's been
Tell us that story. What I want to
this kid
set it up. Yeah.
There's this kid who showed up. There's actually two of them, and they are largely silent kids. And I remember being very surprised that they came back the second time and then the third time, because they never wanted to participate in anything. And they are, when I tell you, shy to a degree that I would refer to as crippling, that is the truth. And with one of these two kids, I had a moment where I happened to be on stage coaching him through an exercise, and he said something, and it was so funny. And I heard it because I was on stage next to him, but he said it in a whisper, and he was on stage. And this is, when I tell you, this is a thing I've seen, not just at this school, but schools all over the country, that kids, when asked to speak in public, start swallowing their words and speaking at a pace that all it shows is their fear, and you can't hear or understand them. I go, oh, this is real. And again,
which breaks my heart because they have something to say, right?
Yeah.
Like they just need someone to help them. Yeah.
They want that spotlight off of them, though.
Yeah.
This generation, they are not interested in the spotlight. Move it along, please. And this forces them to have some comfort with it. But I said to this one kid, I'm just going to pause you there and let you know, like, there are about, I think, 4 or 5 kids on stage and 15 more watching. And I went, you just said something that I think was really, really funny, and nobody laughed. And I bet that feels a little stressful. But the reason they didn't laugh, I'm pretty convinced it's because they couldn't hear you. So do me a favor and say the same exact thing you just said, word for word, but yell it this time. And this kid yelling was slightly above what we would call a speaking voice, you know. And the room, everybody's jaws dropped, and people were legit howling. Like, it was very funny in this high school room. And he got a huge laugh. And his friend, I saw his friend kind of nodding. And from that moment forward, this friend kind of took the ball and ran with our entire program. And very consistently keeps saying and doing things that are wickedly funny, really, really smart. And the room started self-regulating, and it was largely with 2 kids, and this kid was one of them, where some of the kids would get up and we'd describe an exercise and it would fall apart, or they'd get insecure and giggle if it started going bad. And then this kid would jump up and just, he's not a leader by telling everyone what to do, just, hey, can I go? And then he goes and does it the right way, crushes, and everybody else goes, oh, that's how it works. And now that's where the bar is set. And now that's the starting
They're
point.
all learning from each other in real
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
in person, and you're making it safe for them to do that.
And that's a 100% improv class standard thing. Hey, whoever goes up first, thanks for taking the hit. You're going to be the ones who figure it out. It's going to go better for the next people. And the third group, it's going to go even better. This kid very consistently is the one who's like, here's boom. And and then he goes back to just sitting down and being silent with his hands in his pockets, not talking to anybody. And then just a couple times too, where he would step up towards the end of a workshop and say something that just stole the show. And everybody's like, oh my goodness, where'd that come from? And another time where Jamie was doing one last round of an exercise and asked for volunteers, and he was kind of timidly raising his hand, and it was a game built to have 4 people. I said, Jamie, can we add 5? And he went, sure. And this kid jumped up, and I realized he's so shy about raising his hand, but I knew I can tell he's hungry and wants to get up and do it one more time before we take a 2-week break. And then he went up and he crushed, and he's getting everybody in the room to laugh. And just this past Wednesday, we had our smallest number of kids showed up, which I was bummed by because we're deep into the year. So there are only 5 kids, which we got to really challenge each kid individually in a way that felt safe. There's not 20 kids watching. And I was able to give each of the kids a little bit of pushing and prodding. And I said to this kid, I was like, usually you've been stepping up and you'll do something, and it usually happens about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way into the workshop each week. And you steal the show, and it crushes. And I said, I'm going to call you out and let you know, I have a feeling that for that first 40, 45 minutes that you're waiting to do that, I bet there's a lot of moments you could have just done it, and you're just hanging back because you're being shy. And then eventually you do it. And I was like, do you know what I'm talking about? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, am I right? And he's like, yeah, like, yeah, there's times, yeah, where I could be getting up. I know what you're talking about. And I said, I think you have to realize that the rest of this group has started to look at you as a little bit of a leader. And he kind of got embarrassed at the thought of it. But what was really beautiful was the other 4 kids who showed up that day were all on stage with him, looking at him like, yeah, you don't know that? Like, their reaction was like, of course. Yeah, dude, like, you don't know we're all looking to you at this point? And I saw him looking around and it dawning on him of like, he's this kid who's cripplingly shy. After the 3rd week, the teacher in charge came up to me and said, I just need you to know that kid is really shy, but you've done 3 one-hour workshops with him, and in those 3 hours, I've now heard him speak out loud more than the total I heard him speak out loud when I taught him in a class 5 days a week last year. If you add up the amount he participated in an entire school year of a class, he's participated more in the first 3 weeks of this. So, like, yeah, he's really shy, but you're getting through to him.
Chris, I know you don't. I know you probably don't think of yourself as anything like a high school football coach. But in high school, I had a few talks with my coach about coming into or being or accepting leadership. And honestly, if I could have done it through improv and not had 5 concussions, that would have been ideal. So if you're a coach now, you're like everyone's favorite coach.
Listen, in improv, you take classes from your teachers, but when you have your own independent group, you hire a coach. There is a coaching culture to improv for sure. And anyone who's good knows the difference between being a teacher and a coach. Like, this is language we use in improv again.
You invited, that kid into something that probably sounds like has never happened.
Well, listen to this. So in that day, I mean, there were only 5 kids, so he was able to let his guard down. The anxiety of being in front of as many people went away. He gave a monologue about his family's housing situation, where I just went, this kid is a high school sophomore, being so bold and brave and verbalizing his situation, putting it out there in a way where I'm like, so cool to see him as a young person be able to express this stuff. He then did a bunch of scenes that were hilarious and absurd and silly right on the heels of doing this thing that was heartfelt and serious. So you can imagine my heart's being pulled in a number of different directions, and he's breaking my heart. He's making me laugh super hard. He's, I'm picking up on moments of his reality. And before he left, one more time, I went, I want you to know, like, when you wait until it's 3/4 of the way done to go out and crush it, when I know you could be doing it earlier, I go, it helps me so much when you do that. Because when you do that, everybody else realizes that it's possible. You're the one showing them what's possible. And if you show them earlier, it means that I don't have to fight as hard to get them to try. And I bet you get to have more fun because we'll be able to take it farther. Like, it'll help you because everyone wants to get on board once you do it. And he looked at me and he went, and we have not really spoken personally. It's all been through notes up until this point. I think this was week 6 of our 10-week contract.
Mm-hmm.
And he went, I really appreciate what you're saying. And you've been saying some nice things to me about this. And I told my mom, and she actually doesn't believe me. And I went, what? And he said, and he almost framed it as if he was borderline getting in trouble for lying. He was like, I told my mom that you've been telling me I'm pretty good at this, and she does not believe that I could be good at this, that I'm doing this in front of all these people. And I actually just yesterday, he left, and it was wild. It was me, Jamie, who's our other Laughing Together artist, and the teacher who's running this program for the school. And he was the last one to leave, that kid. And the teacher waited to make sure he actually went down the stairway, and he shut the door. And we all were just like, oh my goodness, like, oh my goodness. And just talking about him and him saying that. And I actually wrote an email and sent it to the teacher to be passed on to his mom that effectively was like, I just need you to know he's crushing it. And I'm an outside contractor. I don't know what his grades are like. I don't know what he's like in the rest of his life, but he's not lying to you. Like he has quietly become the leader of this public performance class. It's a real joy to have him there. And he's not lying to you when he tells you he's doing really good. And I was able to say, I've taught thousands of people in this style of comedy over the years. And to see someone as young and shy as him come this far in 6 weeks, I've rarely seen someone come from that far away from it to where he's at in this span of time. And he's really good. And I don't know if his mom will even get that letter or what effect it might have, but it meant a lot to be able to write it.
That's incredible. It is such an important lesson on how much it matters to have that one person believe in you. And it's not always our parents. And as a parent, I hate to say, even for my kids, it's not always me. Sometimes I think I know them and I think I know what they're good at and what they're not good at. And I try to make them do things they're already good at so they feel successful. But for all of us who are parents, who have lives where we get to speak into others' lives and help them, I think it's just such an important lesson to think about how much our opinion of someone's potential or even their, ability to get to a place, how much that matters to them and how much it actually dictates what they're going to do in life. I mean, there's a very good chance that what you just described has changed the trajectory of this kid's life in an incredible way.
Right. Like the identity formation of someone saying, this is who you are good at this. I see you doing leadership, taking a risk, speaking. That's shining a light on his identity.
We might get to hear more from this kid as a society than we ever would have in the past because of him knowing that he's like proficient at this point.
Well, that's very kind. I would like to think that, any good improv teacher would tell you, like, rather than take credit for that, you go, that's what you are trying to facilitate is the self-actualization of these things and pointing it out when it's happening. You're not, you are not a magician conjuring it. It's in them and it's your job to get it to the surface. And that's what artists who teach this type of thing do. And, one last thing I just want to say about it in that moment that I'm very proud of with this school in particular is it didn't even dawn on me until a few months ago, but I go, comedy, even other types of arts outreach or arts interventions, music, not every kid can afford a guitar or a saxophone or a cello, or not even a rental, even visual arts, you need a canvas, you need brushes, you need paints, even other types of arts. I sit here, I go, what if you can't read? What if you're dyslexic? What if you can't handle a script? What if that's going to make you walk away? This is, not only was it invented as social work, but as it grew, the people who founded Second City, one of them was a guy named David Shepard, who was obsessed with the idea that this needed to be working class accessible theater that could go neighborhood by neighborhood. He used to famously say, I want to create a type of theater that you could show up on the docks at lunchtime and perform for the longshoremen and they will understand every reference and feel like it's for them and of them. And I really think about comedy and I go, I think comedy and dance are perhaps the only two things that can happen on stage at Lincoln Center and can also happen on a corner in the Bronx. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There was world-class ballet happening at Lincoln Center in the late 70s at the same time that people were inventing breakdancing a couple miles away in the Bronx on strips of cardboard. And I sit there and I go, the accessibility of it is also, I think, part of the self-actualization that these kids are able to show.
What do you do when you don't have the money to pay for entertainment or go to a show, or you entertain each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think a lot of your life choices get very limited because you're constantly thinking about what you can and cannot afford and what people, quote unquote, like you are supposed to be doing.
But when you know how to entertain each other, or you know you have that skill and all of a sudden you can use it, I feel like in a world that, or in a culture in which we are continually finding new ways to profit off of really taking away human experience, especially from our kids, you are giving them back this gift of what it means, the deep connections of what it means to be most human. The human experience, like that's where our meaning comes from, is our relationships.
Yeah.
Something that I wrote down pretty early on in the conversation was creative expression. And I've been hearing that a lot in just podcasts and things that I'm listening to, and how I feel like people have a really specific idea of what creativity looks like, at least I think. But it really, to me, I'm like, everything that you just talked about is creative expression in my mind. And just the impact of that on the brain and the body is so huge. So, yeah, I just am so inspired and excited that this exists, and really just want to thank you both that this is happening and giving people a space. Like, I grew up as a super shy, quiet kid, and I feel like a lot of kids have a lot they want to say, but don't. It's very powerful, and I think I could have really benefited from something like this growing up.
So good to hear, Hannah. Thanks for sharing that. I think
Yeah.
you and I both could have probably. Yeah.
Better late than never.
Yeah. I think in another conversation, I would also want to know, like, what Chris would have been like growing up in this program, like what that would have looked like.
Well, you know, some of the inspiration for the program is that I was a kid who was fine, would have been okay, I think, but had a teacher who kind of flagged a lot of things about me and asked me to take her drama class my senior year of high school, which I was like, all right, maybe. And then she made the whole thing improv games. And it completely flipped a switch of like, oh, right, I get B minuses, C pluses. I don't try that hard. I don't care. I'm kind of a wise ass. My teachers, I remember her once saying to me, like, your teachers are kind of tired of it, but I think it might be talent. So take my drama class. Like that was it. And it totally changed things for me. And yeah, I think I kind of lived a life where one teacher stepped in and gave something like this to me. And I do think some of my impulse on Laughing Together is to go, oh, if I can concentrate that and mobilize that and pass that on to others, maybe even a little younger than I was at the tail end of high school, it would just help them more.
Do you keep in touch with that teacher? Have you ever reached out?
I do. I actually got dinner with her. She found out about Laughing Together and emailed me immediately. And I was like, you're the inspiration. Like, you're one of the people who inspired the whole thing. And she's still teaching. We still live in New Jersey. We got dinner together a couple months ago. And it's, it's cool. It's cool for me to be able to tell her all this stuff now. I still call her Mrs. Blevins. She's like, my name is Melissa. You're 40. You're in your 40s. Stop. But I just can't, and I think it is, especially a public school kid. Like, the arts did not feel viable to me until one person stepped in and was like, oh, kids like you sometimes like stuff like this and excel at it. And if I didn't have her, like, that was not my reality growing up. Like, my dad was a very hardworking man. My next door neighbor was a fireman. There were plumbers who lived on my block. Like, I was working class. This idea of like, you could be an artist, I needed someone to tell me that. And for me, it worked out. And I went and had a career in the arts. But I look back to that original synthesis of it and I go, even if it didn't lead to a career, she just helped straighten me out and put my head on my shoulders and helped me find some motivation. That was never going to be academics for me. That was never going to be sports for me. Those were kind of the two main tracks.
I wonder if anyone ever thought this guy's going to write several books. They're going to be good.
No, I don't think anybody, I don't know. I don't think there were too many people in high school that would have predicted that guy's going to go get all these things done. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back too hard. Like, I'm happy that I've found work over the years and I view myself as a worker, but
yeah, I would say, Chris, and I've said this in front of you two people many times, but I've never seen the combination of talent, like comedic talent, and then also like the work ethic that could, I can't compete. I feel like it's incredible. So, it's
incredible.
It's very New Jersey. I mean that in a good way.
There's a lot of Jersey in there for sure, but a lot of it is, I think it's two things. I'm like, I've seen people who are special talents, and I'm smart enough to know I'm not one of them. Like, I need to put in the work, like I was at UCB when Donald Glover showed up, and we were all like, everybody just get out of this guy's way. Can we just get out of his way, please? He's destined for great things. Like, Ellie Kemper showed up. Everybody was like, move aside. Everyone make room for this. This is a special talent. I'm somebody who needs to, like, those people did work very hard, but I need to hustle hard to keep up. And I also think too, one of the things that I think is starting to happen as there's this real class separation in America too, is that the arts are more and more even comedians. I go nuts because I go, a lot of it ties into, well, all the venues are owned by Ticketmaster and Live Nation now, and this means you go to buy a $20 ticket, and with all those fees, it's actually $35, $40. Well, who can afford two $40 tickets for a date night if you also have to get a babysitter and drinks and dinner? The arts are only for rich people? No. Like, I am very proudly an artist with working class roots, and I think I am very steadfast in making sure that's always the case with my stuff, because this idea that the arts are only for people who can afford it, I think that's bad news.
That work ethic, though, is why it's been so fun to work together, Marlon. Like, Chris, whether it's at the conference or just doing some of the operational building out of the program, for me, at least, Chris, like, you are constantly, especially at the conference, but just like, oh, this is going to be fine. Like, when Chris shows up, all of the anxiety and stress around these things, because he's this super experienced industry professional, like, it's going to feel easier and it's going to feel lighter, and he'll do some bits and we'll connect on a human level.
I'll also pull back the curtain and tell you, I've also told Britney, that's because you finally got an East Coast guy. You got an East Coaster. You got all these very kind Californians at the company, and everybody's trying to protect each other's feelings. You need a little bit of that East Coast energy to just show up and be like, I'll do this and this. I won't do this. And we're going to change this to this. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because that's the East Coast way of
nonsense.
being nice. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I need right now. Let's
too much
go.
happening to do anything. I feel like I always think of Chris as the Tracy Jordan and the Liz Lemon at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Totally.
Yeah.
It feels like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Especially when we're like screen sharing. I'm like, okay, Chris, log into your Asana account.
Yeah.
This is how
for all
you're
the
at a
compliments.
subtask.
Brittany's not blowing up my spot that it's like, can you just figure out how to open your Google Calendar so you stop being late to meetings? Like, can you just at some point figure out how to do anything resembling the actual job?
I do remember you first learning how to do Google Slides and seeing some of your first slides, and they kind of, for me, I felt like they were just cue cards. They just seemed like all caps and then just all text.
Yeah, no, anything that requires having actual job skills, no. For all the compliments you all have given me today, I can't. I'm bad at that. But when I'm like, I have a feeling we could mobilize artists in different hubs across the country and do this, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, does anyone,
Visionary. We're just going to get you like your own Clippy just to walk you through all the Word docs, and then I think we'll be fine. Chris and Brittany, can you both tell us where to find Laughing Together. If there's anyone who is right now thinking this is perfect for my class, for my kids, my students, I want to tell my school and the community about this because I think it'd be good for them. Where can they find information about Laughing Together, and how do they get started?
You can go to laughingtogether.org, and all the links to express interest are there. To be clear, we've done 10 workshop contracts. We have a 12 workshop contract coming up, but we also have done 1-hour workshops, and that's our entire involvement in a district. Like, we're very malleable and happy to show up where we're needed and wanted. And you can find info on how to get that pitch process pipeline so that we can let you know about what we do. And also, if there's anybody listening who's just like, this sounds cool, I want to support it, there is also a donation link. And if you throw in money, like, it just helps us get it out to more schools, especially, you know, there are a lot of schools right now that don't have disposable income for things like this, and it just helps us get it out to more places. So
if you are a person who values the arts and you want to make sure that everyone can take part and kind of see the same beauty and have their life changed by the arts, and focusing on something that's not just facts or just work, or just getting the next meal, and you want to bring something into someone's life that they probably would not experience otherwise, please donate. Pay for a workshop. Pay for a workshop at the school in your community. If you can do that, do it. We would love to see that, and we would love to thank you for it. Workshop costs a few $1,000s typically to have in an area. And if you can help bring that kind of experience and connection to the kids' lives in your community or a community that you care about, please consider doing that. I want to thank you both for being here, and I can't wait for people to hear this. I think it's so inspiring. I think it takes two things that are incredibly important, and they really complement each other if you do them in the right way. And I think, Britney, your experience and knowledge when it comes to the research and the play therapy and what that can do for our kids to grow as human beings and to grow in their relationships. And Chris, your hard-earned skills through teaching improv for all these years and your success in comedy and the platform that you've built, between these two, I can't wait to see how we change the world next. Thanks for joining us today. We hope it helped. Stay connected with us at thishelpspodcast.com.